All right, in this lecture, we're going to be learning about how to create space in your drawings. So space and perspective are basically tied together, but space doesn't always necessarily follow perspective rules exactly. Sometimes it's just knowledge that you have to have in your head that you apply to your drawings. So let's get started. So right here you can see that I have these 6 rectangles drawn out and they're all labeled. So let's start with overlapping. So when you want to create space in your drawings, one way you can do that is by overlapping objects. So let's say, for example, that we have something like a ketchup bottle. So the way we can tell that this ketchup bottle is closer to our viewer than another object is by overlapping it over another object. So let's say that we have some sort of a mason jar right behind it. And we're going to draw that so it's behind the ketchup bottle. Well, we just created space. Now we know that this ketchup bottle is closer to the viewer or the camera than this jar right back here. We could even add stuff further in the background. So let's say we added the edge of a counter like that. Now we know that this back edge of the counter is further away. And we could even add something like a picture frame hanging on the wall behind him. Something like this. That's being overlapped by our mason jar. And since this mason jar is made of glass, we could even just go ahead and kind of sketch in like that because it's see-through glass. Anyways, so you can see how these overlapping creates space and depth in your image. The next way we can do it is with size. So let's say, for example, that we have a person and they're standing right here. And let's say that this person is standing in an environment with a house. Well, if we put our house right here, well, what this does is it creates space. We know that a human isn't as big as a house, and so the fact that this house is smaller than that human means that it must be closer to the viewer. So let's go ahead and let's erase this house. And let's apply both of these things that we just learned. So not only are we going to make the house smaller like we just drew it, but we're also going to overlap it. So if we draw the house like this, well, now we have 2 types of space going on. Not only are they overlapping, but they're also, the size difference is creating space. Let's go ahead and move on to placement. So placement on your horizon line can create a lot of space in your image. So right here, this looks kind of funny that the house is below this person. This can happen in an actual image, but what would look a little bit more natural is if, let's say we have our horizon line out here, and then we have our person standing right here. Just grab my eraser, clean this up a little bit. Now, instead of putting our house right here like that, right towards, or starting right on the bottom of our frame, what we want to do is let's go ahead and put the house further out here. So not only are we going to make it smaller, but we're going to place it a little bit higher up towards the horizon line. Go ahead and use that eraser. Erase out this horizon line where the house is. And that helps a lot more, actually placing that a little bit higher up in the image. So when things get smaller, they tend to get a little bit higher than the images that are closer, or vice versa. Next, let's go ahead and have a look at detail. So things that are closer to the viewer tend to have more detail than things that are further away. So the further away it gets, the less detail we're going to see. So an example of this would be somebody that's close up to our viewer or our camera. So let's go ahead and draw just a really simple face real quick. We can go ahead and give him a little nose, some eyebrows, some eyes, and some lips. We can even go ahead and give him some hair. Maybe we can even give some definition in the cheekbones. All right, great. So even though this isn't incredibly detailed, you'll get the idea. If we draw a person further back, let's go ahead and make this person that's further back, let's make them smaller and a little bit higher up in our image. So we're going to follow some of these rules we just learned just barely. So because they're far away, we're not going to see as much detail. So we might see simple things such as the hairstyle. I'm going to go ahead and erase some of this face out just so we don't get such a dark outline. So we might see a little bit of this hairstyle. We might get just kind of some black areas for the eyes and the nose and the mouth. But there's a lot less detail on that, and that's because he's further away. We can't get as much detail in, and the viewer or the camera can't pick up as much detail. So things that are closer to the camera are going to have more detail. Next, let's have a look at values. So values are just the lightness or the darkness of a color. Let's just stick with grayscale for now. So the further away something is, the lighter it's going to appear. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab a gray. So I'm going to grab a gray that's, let's say, somewhere right about there, about a quarter of the way down from white, maybe a third of the way. And what we can do is we can go ahead and just draw a mountain range. So we're just going to draw something super simple. Just kind of like two triangles like that. We can fill that in really quickly. So this light gray is a lighter value. Next, let's go ahead and grab a darker value. So let's say that we want to grab something like, we'll grab something about a mid-tone gray. So you can see over here in my color picker, I'm choosing a mid-tone gray like that. And let's go ahead and add something like, we can just add some simple grass or something like this in the mid-ground. So this is the middle ground. I'm going to go ahead and fill this in now. And lastly is the foreground. This is the part that's the closest to us. So we'll go ahead and we'll select a really dark gray, almost a black. And then we'll go ahead and we can add in, let's say we're in the woods looking out and there's some trees in the foreground. Those are going to be the darkest part of our image. So that would be creating space with values. We'll get much more into that later. But for now, you just need to understand that the further away something is, the lighter it becomes. Next is perspective. So perspective is where we get into the really technical parts of creating space and actually making it very accurate. Now, basically everything you see has perspective incorporated into it. People, a piece of fruit, animals, buildings, even so you might just think of perspective as something like a cube or building, something very simple, but even a person's face has perspective built into it. And we'll learn more about that throughout this section. But what you need to understand is basically perspective is built off of points on a horizon line. So your horizon line, let me switch back to a black. Horizon lines are just a straight line that go through your image. So that might be a little bit too thick. So it's a line that goes straight through your image. And then you have points on this. So for example, 1 point perspective would just have 1 point on that line. And off of that point, we can go ahead and draw lines coming off of it like this in any direction we want. But let's say we have them coming off in that direction. We can go ahead and connect a line coming down like this and then draw a rectangle like that. Then we can go ahead and draw a line right there to complete this rectangular cube. And now you can see that we have a rectangular cube that's drawn in perspective. And if we wanted to draw another shape or another form in here, let's say, for example, a square cube, and we can do it on the other side, and we have these lines coming back like that. We can go ahead and connect it like this, and now you can see that these are both drawn in the same perspective. If we were to go ahead and erase some of these lines out, now you can see that both of these cubes are drawn in the same perspective and it looks correct. All right, so that brings us to the end of this lecture. So just remember that the 6 ways we can create space in our drawings is by 1, overlapping objects, 2, changing the size of objects, 3, placing them at different points. The further away it is, the closer to the horizon line it's going to be. 4 is detail, so adding more or less detail depending on how close or how far away it is from the viewer. 5 is changing the values, so things that are closer to the viewer will be darker and things that are further away are going to be lighter. And lastly is actually using technical perspective to make sure that we're basically doing all of these things right. The overlap, the placement, all of that good stuff. All right, I'll see you in the next lecture.